Welcome to Tardisian Files. In the words of the 15th Doctor, there are powers beyond this universe. Ancient beings older than time itself, with abilities that defy the laws of physics. But who are they? What do they want? And where did they come from? Join us in this mini-series where we will explore one of the most elusive concepts in the Doctor Who universe, the secrets of the Pre-Universe. In part 1, we discussed how the Pre-Universe was a nonsensical state of existence, existing without time or light or matter, or at least in the way that we perceive it in this universe. Instead, it was governed by different laws of physics, allowing things such as magic and astrology to work. But what about the inhabitants of this universe? We know from various episodes, novels and audio stories that, despite the seeming impossibility of life as we know it existing in the Pre-Universe, there was an abundance of life in this primordial plane. So in this episode, we are going to be discussing the inhabitants of the Pre-Universe. Who lived there? What social hierarchies governed these species? Which of them were allies? Which of them were enemies? Many of the species that we know of from the Pre-Universe survived into the main universe. This includes beings such as the Ancient Lights and the closely related Helix intelligence. These were two races of entities who drew their power from astrology and the zodiac. The Mandragora Helix, encountered by the 4th Doctor, was a member of the latter species. Demons existed in this dimension, such as the Beast, who became the inspiration for the Devil in all religions of N-Space, and the Beast's son, Abaddon, a demon with the power to consume the life force of anything caught under his shadow, and Abaddon's rival, Pupkum. Finally, the Destroyer was another demon who, though we don't know exactly where he came from in the Pre-Universe, we do know that he was summoned centuries later in N-Space by the sorceress Morgane in 1997, who was herself from a neighbouring universe of N-Space. The Disciples of Light were a people who also existed in the Pre-Universe, and they rose up and imprisoned the Beast on Croptor, and even potentially settled on the planet underground to stand sentinel over his pit before dying out. Elusive beings such as the Entropy Sirens also existed in the Pre-Universe, as did the greater of the Great Old Ones, such as the Elder Gods, the Great Intelligence, and potentially even one that many new fans will be familiar with, the Toymaker. The Custodians of Exodus were also another set of beings that existed in the Pre-Universe. They were beings of pure light, or at least that's the form they took on in the main universe, who guarded the now time-locked conjunction of 17 galaxies. Even species such as Leviathans existed in the Pre-Universe, now sitting in the space between universes, their limbs spreading throughout the void. A single movement could distort and manipulate the realities their bodies encircled. As I said, many of these species survived into the main universe, and have encountered the Doctor on numerous occasions. But despite this, we don't know much about these beings other than their purpose appears to be to play endless games with the mortal beings of this reality. So, what social hierarchies existed within the Pre-Universe's inhabitants? Though there aren't many intact accounts of the hierarchies and the levels of power in the pre-universe, evidence presented by the survivors indicates that there was indeed a level of hierarchy within species and groups of species. Additionally, we know that there were conflicts in the pre-universe whose legacies survived in the main universe. The prime example is the story of the beast. In the Satan Pit, we learn that in the days of the pre-universe, an ancient civilization known as the Disciples of Light rose up against the beast. They imprisoned him in a pit deep underground on the planet Croptor, the Bitter Pill, and they engineered the planet's geostationary orbit around the black hole K37 Gem 5. They also built an underground city, a few levels above from the pit, likely to guard the pit as they filled these levels with air and hieroglyphics on the cavern walls which depicted their war with the beast, and served as a warning to anyone who came across the pit of the nature of this prison planet. It was held in orbit by two urns powering a gravity field just beyond the shackled beast's reach. Even if the beast's mind escaped and tried to free its body, it would have to destroy the urns, collapsing the gravity field, causing the whole planet to fall into the black hole, taking the beast's mind and body with it. The disciples rightly anticipated that the beast and his prison would outlive them, and eons later, after the fall of the pre-universe, the Torchwood Archives Walker expedition from the main universe travelled to Croptor, in search of the energy source for the gravity field in the 42nd century. The 10th Doctor and Rose also arrived at the same time, and after the Doctor discovered the pit, he realised that the Disciples of Light's worst fears had come true, that the expedition's archaeologist, Toby Zed, had become possessed by the beast. To stop the beast, he destroyed the urns. At the same time, Rose ejected a possessed Toby from the expedition's escape rocket, falling into the black hole alongside Croptor, and thus the beast's mind and body were finally destroyed. But the beast's son, on the other hand, had already been defeated centuries earlier. This brings us on to the story of Abaddon and Pupkum. Abaddon, the son of the Great Beast, had a lesser-known conflict between his doppelganger, Pupkum, and their respective allies, entities known as the Light, Abaddon's allies, and the Dark, Pupkum's. Given how Billis Manger described Abaddon to have been cast out before time, it's safe to assume that their rivalry originated in the pre-universe. At an unknown point prior to the pre-universe's destruction, Abaddon and Pupkum had been separately approached by beings of opposing forces, the Light and the Dark. Each side wanted the demon's help to eradicate the other. Abaddon allied himself with the Light, and they granted him the power to consume the life of anyone who came under this shadow. In a twist of irony, Abaddon was actually on the right side of this conflict, as this power, while uncontrollable, was only intended to consume the Dark. The two's fight went on until, through unknown means, the two demons and their allies became imprisoned in the disturbance that would soon become the Cardiff Rift. Centuries later, through the manipulations of Billis Manger, the rift was opened wide enough by Torchwood 3 in an attempt to rectify the splintering of the rift that was causing people and objects to fall through time across the world, though this effort, while successful, also allowed Abaddon to escape. It is unclear why the enormous demon decided to attack Cardiff. However, he had just spent a few millennia trapped in a time rift with his sworn enemy, so he probably just got up on the wrong side of the bed. Abaddon's release, however, was short-lived, as Jack Harkness tricked him into feeding on his immortality, an act which proved to be lethal to the demon. Unbeknownst to Torchwood until a few months later, as revealed in the novel Twilight Streets, Abaddon's death actually put the Light at a disadvantage against Pupkum and the Dark. Billis Manger ended up forming a temporary truce with Torchwood 3 in order to trap the Dark in an ancient box, allowing the Light to return into the rift and defeat Pupkum once and for all. Like father, like son, Both the Beast and Abaddon started their conflicts in the pre-universe, went on to become imprisoned until eventually being defeated in the main universe. Other species from the pre-universe didn't appear to carry over their conflicts from the pre-universe, but as we'll see in part 3, they were no strangers to starting new conflicts in their new universe. Aside from the Beast and Abaddon, the Great Old Ones are another group of races from the pre-universe of which we have some information about. The Great Old Ones are not a singular species as such, but rather a grouping of powerful beings that survived the pre-universe's destruction. There are conflicting accounts of the origins of the Great Old Ones, as not all the Great Old Ones originated in the pre-universe. Some originated in neighbouring universes and just made the jump after the Big Bang, while others originated during the dark times of N-space. However, most sources consistently agree that the greater Great Old Ones consisted of the Guardians of Time, the Elder Gods such as Fenric and Wayland, the Animus, the Great Intelligence, the Ancient Lights, the Mandragora Helix, and potentially the Toymaker, all of whom were beings left over from the pre-universe's destruction. Whereas beings such as the Gods of Ragnarok, the Eternals, and the Nestine Consciousness originated in the Dark Times, and in the case of the Gods of Ragnarok, they originated in another universe entirely. The Doctor partially explains the existence of the Great Old Ones in the main universe in the prose All-Consuming Fire, stating that the Great Old Ones were the equivalent of the Time Lords in the pre-universe. Upon the pre-universe's destruction, they sealed themselves in a bunker pocket reality a second before the pre-universe ended, and then jumped back into the newly born N-space. However, when they emerged, they found that N-space was governed by different laws of physics. And, what's more, they found out that they were immune to these physical laws, giving them godlike powers in the new universe. Different universe, same story of dominance and conquest, eh? So, what rules of hierarchy do the Great Old Ones follow? Both the pre-universe native Great Old Ones and the non-native Great Old Ones all follow a hierarchy that is based on respect and reverence for the other's power, i.e. the more powerful a Great Old One is, the higher up the food chain they are. The Elder Gods and the Guardians of Time sit at the top of this hierarchy, with the Elder Gods having their own lesser and greater members within their ranks. The Elder Gods use their great power to amuse themselves, in their pocket dimension known as the board, where they play against each other using mortal beings as pawns in their games. These games can also be a way for Elder Gods to declare war on one another, as seen in the audio Gods and Monsters, where we saw the rogue Elder God Fenric competing with the other Elder God, Wayland, for his shield. An artefact which, in Fenric's hand, even the other Elder Gods feared. In this story, we saw the other Elder Gods backing Wayland, knowing that Fenric would easily use the shield against them, upsetting the balance of power within their ranks. Ultimately, both Fenric and Wayland lost when the Doctor's companion Hector Schofield sacrificed his physical body, trapping his ghost, and the two Elder Gods in the ruined void where the board had been when the realm finally collapsed on itself at the conclusion of their game. Other Great Old Ones, such as the Mandragora Helix and its distant relatives, the Ancient Lights, followed rules of astrology. Both entities had the ability to alter reality, and to control great numbers of people through the use of their star signs. However, they were limited to only being able to manifest in certain places due to the alignment of stars, which would create conjunction events, allowing them to arrive on planets such as Earth to begin their invasion. Unlike the Mandragora Helix, however, the Ancient Lights saw their conquest of Earth, if it can even be called that, as a means of establishing peace on Earth, and later the rest of the universe, aiming to unite all of the houses of the Zodiac. However, not all Great Old Ones follow a strict hierarchy. Both the Animus on Vortis and the Great Intelligence were beings whose sole purpose appears to be to gain physical form and exert their dominance over the universe. The Animus took on the form of a sort of parasitic fungus and took control of the local Zarbi on Vortis, turning them into aggressive henchmen to do its dirty work, until it was finally defeated by the First Doctor and his companions. Additionally, the Great Intelligence tried to manifest itself several times on Earth. First, as the controlling consciousness of Robot Yeti, in the form of silver spheres, next as a web-like fungus, just like the Animus, and then it took on the form of psychic snow, eventually settling in a semi-physical collective form resembling paper ghosts, known as the Whispermen. Despite being unaligned with the other Great Old Ones, both these species followed the common modus operandi of a Great Old One, using lesser races to complete their endgame. Other Great Old Ones, however, did not seek to reorganise the universe, but instead took up the responsibility to maintain it. The Guardians of Time were a group of beings in the upper echelons of the Great Old Ones, as described by Rassilon. There are conflicting accounts on the number of Guardians that there were, as the prose Divided Loyalties suggest that there were 6, coincidentally the same number as the number of segments to the Key to Time, with surprisingly the Toymaker being the 3rd, the Guardian of Dreams and Fantasy. However, in the Season 16 Key to Time story arc, and the later season's story arc of Enlightenment, there were only 2, the Black and the White Guardians. Regardless of the number of Guardians, one thing is canon now since the Giggle. Both Guardians were bested by the Toymaker in a game and turned into voodoo dolls. Were they freed when the Toymaker was defeated, or, like the Master, did they remain trapped in their defeated forms? According to the prose Quantum Archangel, the Guardians of Time are supposedly above the Elder Gods in the Great Old One's hierarchy, and like any other Great Old One, they can shape reality to their will. Additionally, the Black and White Guardians draw strength from the amount of good or evil in the universe, as those are the metaphysical forces that they represent. Though each Guardian would be made infinitely more powerful and more able to bend reality to their will if they possess the Key to Time. Like any Great Old One, the Guardians will often select mortal allies to do their bidding, though they will still watch their allies' progress from afar and intervene where they can. Other accounts, such as the audio story The Destroyer of Light, describes there being 6 Guardians, each one physical manifestations of different aspects of the same collective consciousness of the sixfold God, who resided in the space in between dimensions, and only able to manifest for brief moments in our reality. To recap, we've discussed the inhabitants of the Pre-Universe, from the Great Old Ones to the Beast. Many of these mysterious beings escaped the Pre-Universe into the main one, carrying the stories of their origins, and in some cases their defeats, with them. Some of these beings set out into this universe to protect it, others to manipulate it for their amusement, and others to manifest and conquer it. However, the existence of these ancient beings poses another question. Why did they have to escape from their own reality into ours? What happened to the Pre-Universe, and why did it end? Find out next time in Part 3 of Secrets of the Pre-Universe. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and share with your friends. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Tardisian Files Podcasts, where we post clips of new episodes as they're released. You can also follow the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Music so you never miss a newly released episode. Thank you for listening, and as always, see you next time on Tardisian Files.